Hola ballers, what's going on? It's Breacher, and to give you a little update on the Melee series, we went with the Survival Hunter, as you probably well know by now. Unfortunately, we have had to say goodbye to the Survival Hunter. Not going to be too surprising for many of you, I don't think, but I really tried. I'm not going to lie, I really tried. I played quite a lot of it off stream to really sort of feel it out, get used to the new class, and I'm reasonably confident in playing it. It falls over itself so often that you're forced to just ditch pretty much everything you've ever learned about World of Warcraft in order to play it effectively in a lot of ways. And while I admire the small player base of people who really want survival to work, 715 looked like it was going to reinvigorate the spec in some manner. Now, as you probably are aware, 715 wasn't particularly kind to hunters overall. Although we've had a bit of a jab at it, we do know there's some hot fixes coming and we expected those. It's of my opinion at this point that survival is pretty much being left for dead by Blizz in most ways. Now, you can take that as much as you want, but I think they're really going to focus on BM and MM for the remainder of Legion, and even they could do with some serious revamps, which I'm sure the Hunters would agree with. I would overall suspect that, sort of re-say, because we did say this at the end of Warlords of Draenor, that the Hunter itself is due like a massive overhaul to bring it up to modern times, like we've seen happen with several other classes now. Particularly the Warlock has had this treatment, and the Hunter could look to have that happen to itself. So survival specifically, why did I abandon it if it was doing just fine? And it does do just fine. You can play it, you can get reasonable damage out of it. We could certainly get some stuff done there, but unfortunately, the other things that I want to bring to you in the Melee series, which is some form of utility in how to use it, the Survival Hunter just doesn't have any. And that's really quite sad. It's really quite sad. It just doesn't bring anything other than an AoE slow, which, let's be honest, who doesn't have that really in some form or another? There are a few classes who don't have it, but not many. You're rarely going to find yourself in a group that doesn't have some way of doing an AoE slow, and realistically, that only kind of comes in handy on things like Necrotic. Anything else, slowing all the enemies is actually very annoying. I know if you've been a raider, then you will know that people accidentally slowing all the blobs on Il'gynoth, for example, is just really frustrating, to the point where you'll have people saying, will you please stop fucking slowing these things? And your raider saying, I can't help it, I naturally do this. Whereas this is kind of the utility that a hunter brings to the table. It's not a big deal. Now, this was nothing to do with would I be able to join the Pug World. I'm kind of done with doing the whole Pug thing anyway. We did our thoughts and comments on the Pug World in a recent video. We would have been able to get into Mythic Pluses no issue running through the stream. It wasn't a case of not being able to access the content. In fact, thanks to the Artifact Knowledge upgrade in 715, I have all the golden traits for the Survival Hunter. As sad as they are, we do have them. And I get it up to about 818, and I know you're going to go, 818? Really? I'm like, well, yeah, that's where I was pretty much fucking done with this thing at that point, honestly. I was just ready to let it go and say, this isn't going to get the job done in terms of the Melee series, and that is my priority here. I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone, and I'm not trying to sit here and say, Survival Hunter is actually really good, it's just that no one plays it. That's just not the case. This spec is essentially a hodgepodge of dog shit all thrown together in my eyes. Like I say, there's a bit of admiration there for people who quite enjoy it and quite like it, and some people have whispered me saying, is it weird that I like it? For me, yeah, it is, because it has lots of mechanical errors where it just falls over itself constantly, and you're shifting back other priorities to kind of just chuck everything in there as much as possible, but revolving around this mongoose bite gameplay. Even with the removal of the cooldown of Lacerate, which is something I asked for because it made no sense that it had a cooldown in the first place. It doesn't help you that much. If you're in a scenario where you're dealing with multiple targets, you're not going to use it anyway, because all your thoughts are with something else, and it costs too much fucking focus. It's 35 focus, so 30 your focus to throw that goddamn shit out there. It's just not going to be worthwhile. So ultimately, I think it's fair to say that the Survival Hunter could have used a lot of love in the early days. On the web show, I went into quite a rant about this, where, in particular, the big fault I find with gaining interest in the Survival Hunter lied with Harpoon 1 not being a grip, and it not having access to mass grip in some form. And it should have gone down the Tinkerer route rather than what I think is kind of a half-arsed idea. And I hate to say that against Blizz, but it does feel very half-arsed with what they consider to try and do with Survival Hunter. They seem to be going one way where they had some machine tech involved. Then they moved it back to being animal-based. They kept the pet, but the pet doesn't really make any sense. In fact, it's very annoying. It constantly is despawning in dungeons. It's getting hung up on stuff. And then you've got one of your main abilities. All Hunter pet issues aside, those are more pet related issues, but either way it just leads to a very lackluster experience. The reason I say having grip and having mass grip could have made a big difference isn't facetious. In fact, it would have just, if it had something like that of interest, and there have certainly been a couple of raid encounters where having access to those, particularly while DKs were in a weakened state, it would have lended more people to playing it. And with more people playing it, gives it a louder voice. Therefore, Blizzard has to take and pay attention to it. If people are being asked to bring survival to help out their raid members or their PvP members, and that is because they're bringing this utility, which is often the reason that people get spots, and then you kind of fill it out with the guys who are doing high DPS. That's generally how this kind of stuff works. Then that would have lended a greater choir to hear for Blizzard. But frankly, I think the situation is this, if I'm being totally honest with you, and that is there aren't a lot of people playing it. There aren't a lot of people who want to play it. It does nothing that makes people even interested in playing it. So why would Blizzard focus time and resources on trying to force it when they have issues already, as we well know, with Marksman and with Beast Mastery? That's obviously where the majority of the Hunter player base is. So let's focus our attentions on trying to get that to work, because we just kind of cocked that up pretty badly in 7.15. I did tell the story that for our Mythic Hellier kill, we did have to bench both of our Hunters following 7.15. And that was really sad because they had put in a couple of hundred wipes into that fight. And while they could do some stuff to contribute, overall, it was just better to bring other people. And when you're dealing with a fight of that sensitive a nature towards damage and performance, etc., then it just was no longer realistic to bring them along for that fight. And the chances are with Nighthold releasing next week, we're probably not going to be seeing Mythic Hellier for a little while, and that made me feel bad for those guys. Those are my friends. Those are my friends, and those are my compadres, and they put in a lot of hours into learning something, but it got to the point, even in a not particularly serious guild, where we do bring the player and not the class. We do that every single night. This was the first and only occasion where I've seen people like, well, you know, yeah, your contribution was great, but we've kind of got to sit you now. We just can't justify it. So Hunter's in a bad space overall, and Survival came off the absolute worst of all of them. It's a shame. It's a real shame. So, yeah, we've moved on to the Fury Warrior. Well, I love the Warrior. I've loved the Warrior since the first day World of Warcraft peeked its head out of the vagina. It's absolutely my favourite class. I don't particularly enjoy arms or prots, but we're going to look deeper into those as well. But we're going to be rocking the Fury Warrior for the remainder of the Melee series. He's halfway through 109, so don't worry, you're not going to be waiting too long. We'll be capping him tomorrow as of recording this video, and then continuing our Melee series as normal. So apologies for the delay. We did cap and get our Survival Hunter ready. Unfortunately, we're not going to get the benefit out of it that we wanted, which is really why I'm leaving behind. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.